Hi and welcome along to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith, and I'm delighted to be joined by a good friend, somebody who I've met over the last few years, and we've exchanged a lot of emails. Ian Frenais, how are you?
I'm fine, Steve. Except there's a horrible heat wave here. I'm in California this weekend. There are fires in the hills. We had an earthquake 2 weeks ago. We have COVID and Donald Trump. Otherwise, everything's really so good.
Fantastic.
I'm hairier since I spoke to you last, and so are you.
Yes, definitely. The beard's coming on and your hair, yeah.
Well, I haven't had a haircut since March. Everyone I know is hairier.
Fantastic. Great to have you on. And obviously NUFC Matters has grown from strength to strength throughout this horrendous period that we're going through in 2020, and been looking for like-minded Newcastle fans to get on the show, and you're as black and white as they come. First and foremost, I just want your take on the takeover, because obviously you're in a different country. You're not getting as much on the news and the radio as we are. But what's the takeover been like for you?
Well, I go, every day I'm on the Chronicle, right? Read the Chronicle, but I'm not as well informed as you or soccer and football. I said soccer, you see.
Yeah, that's
Sorry
it.
about that. Oh my God, football insiders. Yeah. When it all happened, I was very excited, and I thought, new management. What we need is vision and passion as much as money. But you have to. I was a bit disconcerted by the thought of seeing Bin Salman sitting in Mike Ashley's seat in the stand at Newcastle, and that, because of all the obvious associations. But what I don't understand, and what really pisses me off, is how it's taken 4 months for the Premier League to come up with any kind of statement. Of course, in the last 24 hours, Masters actually has, but it doesn't seem to go far enough. And why wasn't it made so long ago? And I think I was asking you before this broadcast, the Football League, the Premier League is a corporation, isn't it?
Yeah. Consisting
of 20 teams. So you have to believe that most of those 20 teams don't want a financial powerhouse among them. And so I just have to believe there's been a bit of deviousness behind the scenes to stop this going through.
It's been a bit
maybe to stop any.
It's been a big cartel, isn't it, Ian? They don't want another, as you say, powerhouse at the table.
Yeah, I have to think that, and it's and therefore, how will that ever be solved if you've got a coalition, underhand coalition of other teams who don't want this to happen?
Yeah.
But what is the consensus in Geordie land of the makeover, the people who bid? Do people have reservations, or they just want it to happen? They just want to be a team that could go somewhere.
I think it's fair to say that in the early days of the takeover, that there was a lot of animosity towards it from certain sections. So you had the letters coming in from Amnesty, you had the letter from Khashoggi's widow, you had the objections from various quarters coming in thick and fast, at least one a week. But because the takeover's dragged on, as you quite rightly say, for just over 4 months, then a lot of those letters are forgotten, I suppose, and people are just wanting to see the takeover go through. I think the one thing that we've got out of this whole process, if we don't get anything else, is that although a lot of us genuinely didn't believe Mike Ashley ever wanted to sell the club, we all know now, especially with the process coming to a halt, that he does want to sell the club. And at the moment, because it's the only deal in town, he does want to sell to the Saudis. I think we always do have to look into what's gone on with potentially the misdemeanors of certain people in Saudi Arabia in the past. We have to look at that. We can't dismiss it. However, I've pointed out on numerous interviews with the media that we all have a past. Great Britain, as we know it, has a past. I mean, it's not so many 100 years ago that we were colonizing everywhere. And at the peak of our time, we were chief in slave trade. So, there's loads of things you can look at, and you think, well, the Saudis are trying to change. They're a changing nation. It's easy to sling mud, and I think, unfortunately for Newcastle fans, we've ended up in this position where we've all had to start flicking through books and looking on the internet to try and understand what the Saudi politics is. And it turns out that there's this huge battle between Saudi Arabia on one side, Qatar on the other side, and Newcastle United in the Premier League are stuck in the middle of it. And I hate to say it, but there seems to be a lot of politics going on with the Premier League and BN Sports and Qatar, and you're seeing lots of media people such as Richard Keys, for example, just to pick one out of the air, who are coming out and they're laying their cards on the table for everyone to see. They don't want it to go through because they have ulterior motives, and it's actually become so annoying, I think, for Newcastle fans. We've been on that roller coaster like we are all the time with our football club, but we're now at this point where fans are just angry. They want Mike Ashley out of the club, but it looks as if we're stuck with him again, because unless there's somebody else comes through, a lot of people feel now that this takeover is dead in the water.
How did Qatar? They've never been behind another bid, but are they just being mischievous?
Yeah, because it's down to the TV rights, Ian. I think that's what it is. I think it's down to TV money. It's down to illegal streams that were coming allegedly from Saudi Arabia, but they claim that they've all been stopped now. It's just a mess. It's the best way to describe it. It's a mess. And if takeovers are going to go wrong, the one place it's going to go wrong, you can guarantee spectacularly, is Newcastle United.
Oh yes, of course. It's like in our DNA.
Yeah.
That. But what happened with Mr. Henry Morris?
Well, you tell me. You're in America. I mean, where is he?
I know, because I was excited about that, because I think he lives quite near me. I thought I'd just pop over there wearing a black and white scarf, even in 90 degrees, and say, now listen, Henry, but I know his office is in LA. He's based here, I think. Yeah. I don't know if he's a good guy or a bad guy. He seems to be okay. But I thought he would step in and make an offer maybe a bit less and save the day, but nothing's happened.
No, there seemed to be a lot of faith in that deal going through by one journalist over here from the Telegraph, Luke Edwards, and he's in fact champions. Luke Edwards has championed Henry Morris over the PCP bid, but 4 weeks on, and we've heard nothing from Henry, and a lot of people feel as if that's a red herring that's been thrown in potentially by Mike Ashley, almost to kick the Premier League up the backside to try and hurry them up during the process. But as you rightly say, that the letter that's come out today from Richard Masters via Chion Wura, the MP in Newcastle, it's quite a strange one, because they're talking about arbitration. Why didn't they take us to arbitration? Well, you don't take anybody to arbitration unless you've had something rejected. And of course, this deal wasn't rejected. PIF, PCP and the Rubens pulled away from the deal. Now, my understanding, the reason that they pulled away from the deal, Ian, is because essentially, the deal had gone on too long and they weren't going to get anywhere. So I think this has given them the opportunity to break the NDAs, and they now have to hope that Mike Ashley, who wants to sell the club, will now turn the corkscrews with the Premier League. He'll push legal action if he can't sell the football club. That's what they're hoping, of course.
What is this condition then that the Football League was saying, Premier League was saying, that you had to specify what your principal entity was that was running the club?
Yeah.
What did that mean? You mean you have to, it's going to be the Rubens, but
Yeah, the sticking point is, Ian, that they're looking at this and saying that PIF, PCP, and the Rubens are the names on above the door when the owners come in. But what the Premier League want to say is that it's the Saudi state. They want to say it's the Saudi state. Now that ties in with the owners and directors test, because if you then say that the Saudi state owns the football club, essentially you're saying MBS runs the football club, and I think they're looking for a way to fail them on the owners and directors test. Again, my understanding is that PCP, Amanda Staveley and her husband, and the Rubens have taken the owners and directors test and they've passed it. Whereas, there has been obviously concern over PIF, and with them being the majority shareholder, of course, they would be well within their rights if they felt that they could to reject somebody. So as you can see, it's a mess. It's a web, and when you get in a web, like any fly will tell you, it becomes difficult to get out. And that's where we appear to be as Newcastle United fans and these people involved in the takeover.
So we'll start the new season with, what, £30 million to buy new players?
We were talking about this on the show the other night, and a lot of people were saying it's 35 million, which is great, but that includes wages, Ian.
Oh, well, that includes the wage deals they have to make.
I mean, it doesn't get any better, does it? We're going from in our dreams 17 weeks ago, hoping to be competing for the likes of Gareth Bale and Ronaldo and Messi, and now we're looking at getting Hendricks on loan. It's an absolute nightmare as a Newcastle fan. I don't have to tell you. You've been through this for years.
Well, never have the stakes been this high.
Yeah.
But it's terrible. It is. It just seems to go from one crisis to another.
What about Steve Bruce, Ian? Steve Bruce as head coach. I mean, he was 11th choice. A lot of people knocked the club back. I mean, was that a successful year for Steve Bruce, do you think, as head coach last season?
Well, it's so weird. It's like everyone is saying it's such a qualified judgment. It's saying, oh, well, actually, he's done better than we thought. It's such a backhanded compliment.
Yeah.
Basically saying we didn't think you weren't really in that kind of A-level, sophisticated, managers, that sexy brands, managers that come from, and then Steve saying, oh, workman-like journeyman manager. Obviously, he's a great guy. And it just seems so unfair for him. And now it's such a backhanded compliment. Well, we did better than we thought. And in fact, if they hadn't had such a disastrous last 6 games, this conversation would be much more optimistic. Because if they hadn't had those awful last 6 games, they probably would have finished 11th.
Yeah, exactly.
And that game at Watford, losing to Watford, and oh God, oh don't, it's agony.
I mean, when you're back in the Northeast, do you get a chance to go to the games, Ian?
Yeah. Well, John Gibson usually arranges that, or Bob Monker. I haven't been to a game for over 2 years. I know. I was just laughing, but I was talking to Gibbo recently, and I was just making him laugh. I said, years ago in the 90s, before pre-digital age, I used to call the Evening Chronicle, with 8-hour time difference. Yeah. So I would call to get the result of the game. But the Evening Chronicle seemed, as soon as they filed the evening paper, they went home. And there was this, the whole building seemed to be in the charge of this one old guy who probably sat in a little cubbyhole. He was the night watchman, and he obviously answered the phone. And I would ring up, I think his name was John or Fred or something. And I'd say, John, it's Ian Frenais. And he always answered the phone like someone who doesn't believe telephones exist. So it was, hello? And I used to say, it's Ian. And just what was the score? And he said, oh, Ian? I said, Ian LaFrench. Oh, the one in Hollywood. And I would say, yes, John, yeah. What was the score? He said, I bet the weather's much better there than here. He would never, and I'd say, yeah, it probably is. So how are you? I'm fine. So what was the result? And then eventually he would say, we're lost. And that's how I used to get the results.
Fantastic. Good stuff.
And in fact, there you go, but nothing much changed in terms of expectations.
No, you're right. 100%. Nothing has. As always, Ian, we always put out a shout out for questions, when we record on Zoom. I've got some great questions from supporters, and gives them a unique opportunity to be able to ask you a few questions. So, Auf Wiedersehen Pet on Twitter, it's the official Auf Wiedersehen Pet account. They've sent some great questions in. Basically, the first one is, please put the rest for the fans of the show. Why did 3 Geordies who went to a match go to a Sunderland game?
I needed a plot. Well, actually, I think if I remember, they did rationalise it. They did say it's better than nothing. Because Newcastle were in the second division there. Sunderland weren't. And they did play a game in Europe. And it was basically, it's better than nothing. That was the attitude. The reason Oz ended up wearing a scarf was because he got pissed and ended up on a charter flight back to Tyneside with all the Sunderland supporters. And obviously someone had wrapped a scarf around his head. But I've had to take a lot of stick on that one. Oh my God.
Chris Cossey asks, Steve, could you ask Ian what his inspiration was for Auf Wiedersehen, Pet, and what his first impressions of the stars of the show were before they became famous?
Well, first of all, the idea came from Frank Rodham. Frank was a film director who was from Stockton, and he made Quadrophenia in those days, Frank. And he just went back home for a visit and met his old mate, who he'd been at school with. And it was his friend. He said, "What are you doing?" And he told him, "I'm working on German building sites in Germany." And then Frank had lunch with Dick and I and said, "Don't you think this is a great idea?" It was the idea that they were rebuilding the city that their fathers had bombed in the first place, and that they were living in a hut, rather like a prisoner of war stalag. And we said, "Oh God, yes." It was just, so it was Frank's idea. And then of course we had to create all the characters. What was the second question about the actors?
Yeah, what were your first impressions of the actors who got the roles? Because obviously the casting side of it, you know, we know a lot of stories about
We knew Tim and Kevin from their other work, and we said they've got to be in it. Jimmy was the unknown quantity. They had casting sessions in Newcastle, and then they would bring shortlisted people down to London. And I remember they said, "Well, we're taking a bit of a risk on this guy. He just walked in off the street. He works in a glass factory or something. But he has got an equity card because he's in a band called the Crabs." And when he walked in, when Jimmy walked into the rehearsal room in London, Dick whispered to me, "Please, please let him just be able to act a little," because he just looked so perfect. And he could act a little. Tim Spall was a later one, and so was Chris Fairbanks, but that was because of different casting problems. But I mean, we were just delighted with the entire cast. Yeah. Never realized how good they were.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's one of those timeless programs. A lot of questions coming in about that. Barry Bowerbank and Geordie Ash on Twitter both asked the same question. Geordie Ash also points out, says, Tim Healy and Noel Clarke have recently expressed interest in doing more Auf Wiedersehen, Pet. Would Dick Clement and yourself be on board for putting one more series together? And Barry Bowerbank asks the same question. Any chance of any more Auf Wiedersehen, Pet?
Well, it doesn't make much sense for guys in their 60s to be working on building sites. It's very, every time, when we brought the series back in 2002, the idea was mooted by Jimmy and Frank. So what we did, we all met for a lunch in London, all the cast. And everyone, it was quite obvious, no one needed to do it. You know what I mean? Everyone was doing their own thing, successful and others. They just wanted to. They loved each other's company, and they loved the acting relationship they had. It was just like, okay, we have to do it. I mean, Dick and I were on a hiding to nothing as the writers, because then you could see the reviews. Oh, they brought this back. You know what I mean? But thankfully, everyone enjoyed it. I loved bringing it back. I loved the series in Cuba. So it was an extraordinary bonhomie bond between that group of actors, which still exists today. And of course, Sunday for Sammy brings them together every so often. And it's just friendships that will last for life. But I can't see them all coming back.
No.
I wouldn't know what to write. I ran out of steam. Please. I mean, we have to write a sketch or two for them every Sunday for Sammy. And that's hard enough.
Yeah. Another great series that obviously you're involved with was The Likely Lads, and a couple of questions coming in from people on Twitter on that one. Annie at Tory on Twitter says, where would Bob and Terry be today, and would Bob have voted Brexit?
Bob would have voted. I think Terry would have been a Remainer.
Mm-hmm.
We always had in our minds a scenario in the future. What happened? You know, Bob worked hard. He was solid. He was industrious. He was a good father, a good husband. And eventually he started his own business, but everything went to shit. Terry was driving over the limit and had a car crash and copped an enormous amount of money for insurance and bought a much bigger house than Bob. And we had another, and I think Bob's daughter ended up in rehab. His son was a roadie for Oasis. We had a whole scenario written once, but that was in the 90s. God knows now. Come on.
Fantastic. Honestly, it's timeless, really. You know, I mean, obviously, it's in its particular era, but again, those scripts are fantastic. A couple of people coming out with lines. Nick Ross says, "Tell Ian the line from the Likely Lads, Terry to Bob. I'd offer you a beer, but I've only got 6. Has to be the best line in comedy." And Geordie Ash follows up with, "I think the line while playing cards in the caravan and Terry goes outside to answer a call of nature. And Thelma comments, it's the first time she's known what being in his hand all night, maybe even tops it." So lots of people with lots of fond memories. It must be pleasing when you know people can just recall your scripts like that.
Oh yeah, it's wonderful. It's fantastic. I mean, the disadvantage is that people keep talking about the past as if we'd stopped working. You know, if we hadn't done anything for the last 20 years. And of course, the truth is we've had lots of things done in recent years. In fact, we would have had 2 films shooting this year. One a film about the Kinks, and another film about a famous heist, a bit like our film The Bank Job, but set in 2000. But of course, with COVID, everything was cancelled. But on the other hand, with COVID, Dick and I, we've just been writing on spec, you know what I mean? And we have 2 series ready if things change. We stopped working together. We work on FaceTime, which is quite interesting because having got used to FaceTime, my wife says, you could now be anywhere in the world, you know, and still work.
Yeah.
That things change. But so we're working away. And, but I must admit I think whatever happened to the Likely Lads is probably my favorite of all the things, because it was the first time we really pulled it off. You know what I mean? The original Likely Lads, we didn't know what we were doing. We were 24 years of age, you know what I mean? But that was the one that kind of, I felt cemented us, and I can watch them again, you know. I mean, not knocking Porridge, Jesus, but I'm particularly fond. And of course, when the second series, then going up and filming in Newcastle, you know what I mean, and actually being there and saying, this is where the series is set. We'd been a bit vague in the original because there were so few Geordie actors around.
Stuart Smith says, I hope you're keeping well, Ian. As a fellow Whitley Bay lad, I used to love the show and how you dropped in the names of a number of Whitley Bay hostilleries into the Likely Lads scripts. Brian Welsh says, just tell him, as a Jarrah lad who moved away from home in 1992, thank you. I spent many hours watching our Wiedersehen pet to keep me sane, to the point my old monk mates loved it. Christian Ross says, he's got 3 questions, all our Wiedersehen pet related. He says, was it simply due to the budget that a lot of the filming wasn't done in Newcastle?
Yes, probably. But of course, what happened? Have you gone?
No, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I lost vision, but that doesn't matter as long as we can carry on.
Yeah.
Well, no, you know, I mean, filming in Germany was expensive in Hamburg, and then building the building site in Elstree Studios. But you know, all the stories, the point of the series was these guys were in a captive situation. So we didn't want them to go back and forwards, you know what I mean? But we did shoot in Newcastle. Yeah. The one that had the most locations was called Marjorie Doesn't Live Here Anymore. And that was the one with the Sunderland scarf. And he came home. And so we did shoot when the story said Newcastle, unless it was just inside a house, we did shoot there.
He also asks, what was the breakdown between the UK government and Cuba that led to Series 4 being filmed in the Dominican Republic?
Well, we went to Cuba, Dick and I, Jimmy and Frank, and we couldn't come up with a plot. We couldn't find a reason why the lads would be in Cuba. And it was my idea to go to Cuba, and I just said it sounds so sexy. But then the last day we were there, we were asked to have tea at the British consulate, and we were all in a really bad mood because we were going to go home without any idea. And they suddenly mentioned that there was a British government department that hired British workmen to do embassies, fix embassies all over the world. And we couldn't believe it. We had a plot. We had a reason why they went there. But we gave the script to the Cuban. They were very helpful. We traveled everywhere. We saw rehearsals of bands, concerts, the ballet. We were given guided tour. But then someone in the government read the script and said no. So what we did was we pretended someone else applied. We were shooting a music video, so we got a lot of master shots of Havana. And then we shot in the Dominican Republic and matched those shots together quite brilliantly. But that was the reason. Someone in the Cuban government didn't like our fetus empire.
Christian
Can you believe it? What? I mean, they had a revolution. You'd think they'd identify with our working class lads, wouldn't you?
You would have thought so.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
Christian's final question is, was the BBC preferred over ITV for Series 3 as the time slot was bigger?
Can't remember. I mean, I think ITV for some reason didn't want it. I don't know if it was the time. I can't remember anything to do with time slots. I think the deal was made with the BBC, and it must have been because ITV thought, thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah.
Ha ha ha.
Strange, isn't it? Strange when you think about the big success that it was. I mean, for me, I think.
Well, just to interrupt you, when we wrote Whatever Happened to Likely Lads, the BBC hummed and hawed. Mm-hmm. And then Dick and I wrote the whole first series on spec. We had every episode written, and ITV were going to do it. And then when BBC found that out, they then jumped in and said, no, we'll do it.
Mm-hmm. Ian Crow asks, could you ask Ian why there was no Geordie characters in Porridge?
Probably because I just spent 3 years writing Whatever Happened to the Likely Lads. And it looked like it was nepotism or a bit chauvinistic. Or people said, oh, you can't have another Geordie in it. Mm-hmm. It's quite an interesting question. Yeah, that is interesting. I've never asked myself that. Maybe it was Dick. I'll blame Dick. I'm sick of having to do a Geordie accent when we're writing.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's blame Dick.
Okay, we'll blame Dick. Dutsky says, could you ask him about the fallout between James Bolam and Rodney Bewes? He says, it's such a shame they never made up before Rodney's death. The crime wasn't anymore. Yeah, was there a big fallout?
Well, there wasn't really a fallout. It's been so exaggerated. I mean, it's just that, they didn't socialize. Jimmy was he always resisted being too identified with a character. You know what I mean? His work was so versatile, but everywhere he went for years, people would, call him Terry. But it was nothing to do with his antagonist. When there was not a hint of unpleasantness between them working together, they worked together so well. And in fact, Jimmy wrote, I think when Rodney died, I think Jimmy wrote a very nice piece, obituary piece, where he said it was so exaggerated. Their relationship was just, they didn't hang out together,
Yeah. Whitburn Mag asks, is it true that Jimmy Neal wasn't very easy to work with on Auf Wiedersehen, Pet?
No, Jimmy was fine. Jimmy, in the first series, obviously, he was nervous because of what he was being asked to do. And I remember one night in Hamburg, I think in the bar, he said to Tim Spall, he said, I can't believe this is happening to me. I was back home doing this, doing that, and now I'm an actor in a bloody series. And I'm staying in this hotel, and Tim very shrewdly says, "You're home, Jim," meaning this is your home from now on. You know, the acting community, and I think it had a profound effect on Jimmy. Jimmy got a bit awkward and beady, especially with me, in the second series, because he didn't feel it had the grittiness of the integrity of the first, and he used to get a bit beady about it. But he was right. So I've always respected his opinions ever since.
Obviously, you wrote television, but you also wrote films, and Ronnie Barker, you know, obviously was a huge success with Porridge. Some great actors in that as well. Did you find it easier writing TV, or did you find it easier writing film?
Oh, I don't mind. It's not easy. It's just different. You know, TV's half an hour plot. A film has to exist over 100 minutes. I don't mind. We've been writing theatre recently. We would have had a play on now if it hadn't been for COVID. It was on in London last year, and it was going to go to Dublin in America this year. It's writing. You know, Dick and I were storytellers, and that takes different forms: movie, TV, theatre. I mean, I'll write a wedding speech for you if you want. Anyone out there? John Gibson, maybe he'd like me to write a wedding speech.
I've got to be honest, we had John and Super Mac on last night. They both passed on the best to you, mate. I know they're
great friends. Great guys.
Another question to ask. As an actor, I obviously observe. I look at people, and you pick up mannerisms, you pick up different expressions and different ways, and you take that into the characters that you perform. Is that, you know, do you use a similar kind of technique when you're writing for characters that you create?
Well, we're the first person, you know, people who reads the lines, and we do read them out loud, which is quite funny, of course, because sometimes they're Russian. Sometimes a black rapper we find difficulty.
Yeah.
But we enjoy, you know, we're quite good with accents. Yeah, we read them loud in all these different accents. We always think that that's the best it'll ever be, which of course is so conceited. But the best part of writing, the best part of the whole process is when, because so much stuff isn't done, hundreds of scripts just not done, sit in your laptop or on your shelf. And there's so much frustration. So suddenly when you're the first day there's a read through, that's what happens when something's cast. Then there's a read through. All the actors sit round a table drinking really bad coffee, and everyone's a bit nervous, and they read the script, and it's the first time you hear the actors read it, and that is just a moment of such relief and elation, because you think it's going to happen. It's now going to go from the page in my head into be realized.
With that in mind, what was the process like for one of my favorite films, which was Villain, starring Richard Burton? Did you have a similar read through with Richard Burton in the cast of that?
God, that's a long time ago. I thought you were going to mention The Bank Job, which is much more recent. No, I don't remember a read through with Richard Burton. He probably felt it was not necessary. No, there was no read through on that film. The best one was on The Commitments. That was just such fun. All those Irish kids, most of whom had never acted before, and two were dyslexic. So that read through was an absolute shambles. But what fun!
Yeah, and what a film it turned out to be. Last one on Villain. Again, it's a personal question for me. But was that based on Ronnie Craig? Because there was a lot of people who watched that film seemed to have the connection. You know, psychopathic gangster. You know, possibly schizophrenic, mother fascination. You know, it was.
Yes, I know what you mean. I mean, it was very similar. With his mother fixation and homosexual. But in fact, it was based on a novel called The Burden of Proof. And I remember, and God, it's gone back in the 70s, and we were so naive about movies and young, but I remember getting a question like this from the Evening Standard. And the journalist said, so is this based on the Cray brothers? And of course, the Cray brothers in 1979 were still around. Dick and I looked at each other and said, oh, shit, and denied it, vehemently. Of course not, because we didn't fancy retribution from those boys in the East End.
Exactly, yeah. Fascinating film. If anybody hasn't watched Villain, I urge you to watch it. Fantastic film. Another one which Newcastle United fans will be interested in, of course, Ian, is Goal. Back in 2005, you were involved in that. I was actually an extra in that. The start of my.
Well, Goal is directed by Danny Cannon. I think it's a really good film. I really enjoy it, watching it, and we were going to do this. We wrote the sequel. But the producer, he was, I'm not going to say what he was, but he dumped Dick and I and the director, Danny Cannon, having made that good film. And they made 2 more, and they're dreadful. So if anyone wants to watch Gold, just watch The Dream Begins.
Yeah, 100%. Well worth a watch. I think a lot of Newcastle fans do enjoy watching.
I was in ecstasy. I mean, I was there. What's his name? Who's manager of Newcastle? Graham Souness.
Yeah.
He took us to dinner. Freddie Shepherd took us out. Then we went to the training ground. So I was just hanging out with real players. There was Alan Shearer was there. Alan was there. Michael Owen was there. Bellamy. This was the players of that generation. Or the other good player. Anyhow.
Yeah, Kieran Dyer and Jermaine Jenis. It was that era, wasn't it?
Yeah, Jenis was there. But for a couple of the actors who were soccer fans, this was the best job ever.
Yeah.
And I thought Danny Cannon made Newcastle look great. He just had such great locations. It's such a good looking film. It's a great look at the Northeast.
No, it is fantastic. You mentioned the bank job, so let's just talk briefly about that. I didn't realise until I watched it, watched it again, that Mick Jagger actually appears in that as a bank safe deposit employee in the film. But Jason Statham obviously is the lead role. But what was it like? What was it like seeing Jason bring your character to life?
Oh, he was great, Jason. I mean, he was just so perfect. We wrote a bank sequel to the bank job, but we've never been able to have a talk to him about it. He did a great job, Jason. I loved that film. It was shot on a very low budget, but it's certainly one of my favorite films. And because it's based on so much truth and murky truth, it makes it a bit more titillating.
Yeah.
But Jason Statham. I mean, Jason wasn't a big star then. But now, of course, we couldn't afford them.
The film industry's changed a lot, and TV's changed a lot. Reality television's come in, and it dominates the major slots these days. Do you think the stuff that you created, which we all know and love? Do you think that it's seen its day now? Do you think that's going to be do you think we're stuck with this horrendous reality, or do you think we'll have a second phase of creative people writing top class dramas and comedies coming through?
Oh, I think, but I don't know about comedy because, and I'm not watching British comedy every night, obviously, so I can't comment on it. I've got some programs I really like, but I think in terms of drama, it's never been better. I mean, the drama series coming out of Britain and America, I mean, and now all the new series because of streaming are for the most part fantastic. I think this is a golden age of drama. And of course, and most of it is now on the small screen, not the big screen. So, I mean, I could write a period piece in Britain, you know what I mean? Like we did Spies of Warsaw about 3 years ago with David Tennant. But I would find it very difficult to write like a comedy, not drama, in Britain, because I'm not in touch, and everything changes so quickly. Slang, references, context, music. You know what I mean? I just would never attempt it.
Yeah. Last question from Twitter tonight is from Sean, and it's a simple one. He says, is Ian Frenais going to buy Newcastle United?
Ian Frenais is not a rich man, but if I was a rich man, it would be a fantasy. Is Ian Frenais going to buy? I thought he was going to say, is he going to buy Blythe Spartans? Just have things in proportion.
Just blame it on
Ian Frenais is not. But God, I hope someone does, and I hope it's someone that comes out of left field, and everyone thinks that's a fantastic idea. It doesn't look like it's going to be Mr. Morris, does it?
No, unless you knock on his door.
Oh God, let's not end the conversation on a sad note. We started on a sad note.
We did. Well, look, what are you working on at the minute, and what's your hopes for the future, Ian? Tell us what the situation is.
We're working on a drama series about Marlene Dietrich. We're working on a comedy, which is a rock and roll comedy. It's just out to an actor at the moment who we talk to every day. I'm not going to say who it is, but he's very well known. Of course, nothing will be pushed forward. Nothing will be greenlit or put into production until COVID is over. And as I told you, the film about the Kinks is on hold for that reason. Everything's on COVID hold. But I just have a great love of life, a great belief that everything's going to be good.
Yeah.
I'm blessed. I think someone clever than me said, you serve the universe best by doing what you love most. And I've been blessed by working every day on what I love most.
Yeah.
That is such a good note to end on, Steve, don't you think?
I think it's great, Ian. As all good script writers, you've started well, you've got a good meaty middle, and you've finished up this.
Oh my God. I'll talk to you after the first game.
Look forward to it. Ian Frenais, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, mate. Take care of yourself.
Yeah, it's been a great joy. My love to everyone out there, all you fans. How are the lads?
Top man. Thank you very much.
Bye, Steve.